Morning, Shabbat Shalom, and welcome to everyone. This is Bill, and I'm coming to you live from the Biblical Lifestyle Center in Texarkana, USA. This is the Sabbath day, the seventh day of the week, and we are enjoying the beauty, the majesty, the holiness of this day. We are reconnecting with our Creator. We are putting aside all the struggles, the trials, the animosity, the hard feelings, the harsh language and rhetoric of the weekdays. And we are entering into His rest, into His shalom, into His peace. He would say to us, as the Mashiach did, He said, "My peace I give to you, not the peace of this world do I give to you, but my own peace." So receive, beloved, receive the shalom of the Creator of the universe and His Messiah. Receive it into your heart, into your mind, and let's explore together the beauty and the majesty of His wonderful Torah. Our series this year, as we've been talking about, is walking in the light, in the divine light of the Creator, of the areas in which He's illumined to show us the pathway that we as human beings, specifically as chosen people, a group of human beings called into His marvelous light, are to walk in and to exhibit and show to the world. The subheading for this year's Torah cycle is Discovering the Secret Wisdom. This is where the light is found. Discovering the secret wisdom that's encoded in Torah's timeless stories. The great storyteller, the Creator of the universe Himself, is telling us His story and telling us our story and the story of the ecosystem world, Earth, that He created for us to manage, to steward, and to guide and guard and transform into His majesty and His glory. So this is the stories that are being told, and we are in the first 5 books of the Bible, which is His storytelling manual, His beautiful collection of stories. Now, we are this week in the 21st subdivision or section of this beautiful storybook. And this particular subdivision is found beginning in Exodus 30, verse 11, through Exodus 34, verse 35. It's parts of 5 different chapters here, so it's a good, solid, substantive download to us. It's all part of the Sinai download whenever this large expanse of revelation was dumped on earth through the chosen people of Israel, through Moses as he's known in the Western world, and his encounters of 40 days and nights on 2 different occasions on that mountain of Sinai. So we're in the midst of that download now. We're having the pivotal moment of that time at Sinai, and that is the golden calf episode. This is the week. This is the time in our storytelling sequence in which we get our annual reminder in its proper context of the absolute worst moment in the national history of B'nai Israel, of the children of Israel. What is that worst, absolute worst moment? It is the moment of the infamous calf sin incident. Now, there have been previous episodes, and we'll find out that we're going to talk a lot today. And I think this week is designed for us to get a grip on and begin to understand the transgression wormhole. What happens when human beings do not walk in the will and in the light of the Creator of the universe? What does it do? What effect does it have? First of all, on the individual. Second of all, upon the area and the family that they live in and live with. Thirdly, with regard to the ecosystem as a whole and the generations and the seed and the bloodline that they're in. What are the ramifications? What are the ripple effects of entering the transgression wormhole, walking away from the Creator? Heaven forbid. Walking away from His divine light and guidance. Heaven forbid. Walking away from His express directions of this is the way, walk in it. Of this is the way to be joyful and fulfilled and have a meaningful and beautiful life. And walking away from that, what happens when we enter the transgression wormhole. Well, this is not the first time. This story of the golden calf that we find in chapter 32 and then extending into 33 of Exodus, the middle part of this Tisa download today. This is not the first time human beings have encountered the transgression wormhole. It started in the Garden of Eden in the stories in Genesis chapter 3. The lust of the eye, the lust of the flesh, the pride of life. You know the story. I won't repeat it, but that's the first episode, the first encounter of human beings with the transgression wormhole. And look what it did. Look what the impact upon it was for Adam, for Hava, for their relationship, for their family, for their bloodline, for the world, for the ecosystem. All these things, the ramifications. Do you now understand? It's not just a matter of personal choice. It's not a matter of, this is what I like to do, and the Holy One will understand. No, it's not about him understanding or not understanding. It's about the ramifications, the ripple effects of the wormhole upon the created order and how to fix it, how he has to come back in and adjust things and adjust us and fix it, fix the wormhole. Let me know if you're having any sound troubles this morning. We've had in the past, we've had a little bit, so I'm hoping that we're seeing none. I don't see any complaints so far. Let's keep going. The transgression wormhole was first introduced in the Garden of Eden with the lust of the eye, the pride of life, the lust of the flesh. The next time we really saw it was in a sequence of transgressions involving Cain. Cain and Abel as they're called in the Western world. But Cain and Hevel, these two brothers were out in the field. Cain lured Hevel into the field, and out of jealousy and envy over Hevel's relationship and his closeness and his favor that he found with the Creator, Cain took up an offense. Flew into an outrage, resisted calls back to maintain order and shalom and find favor him in his own ways, and instead decided to kill Hevel. And so we have this field transgression. The wormhole opened up even broader than the garden wormhole of the lust of the eye, the pride of life, the lust of the flesh. And then we see the pre-flood devolution of mankind. We're building upon the transgression wormhole of the garden and of the field transgression with Cain. We have a whole series of generations of devolution. The lo yirat, the no fear of the Holy One, the sense of disconnection from the Holy One, and therefore I can do anything I please, this wormhole of the transgression, and then into the ra, I will do what I want to do, what feels good to me, what seems right in my eyes, ra, called evil in English, but it's just about the self-will, the self-obsession, the self-driving mechanism, as opposed to the being guided and shown the way by the Holy One. So Lo Yirat was part of the devolution, the Ra was part of the devolution, and then the Shekat, the corruption. That is doing everything the exact opposite way, or significantly differently than the Holy One had said. That's what causes corruption. That's the wormhole effect. It begins to have impact upon creation and upon the individual and upon the families, upon the bloodlines, upon the nations. Oh, you see what's happening here. And then what comes out of that is Hamas as it reaches its maturity, this pre-flood devolution, wormhole engagement by mankind causes not just the fear of the Holy One to be diminished, not just a self-will to be exalted, not just corruption in certain ways, but it causes Hamas, which is violence and cruelty. Men begin to become cruel to one another, cruel to themselves, cruel to their spouses, cruel to their children, cruel to their parents. This is the way in which the transgression wormhole works its way into humanity. And that's a completely ubiquitous problem that mankind has. Well, we're not through yet. We get to the flood, and we think it's all over, but the transgression wormhole is still there. We still have the opportunities, and we find that with Ham, the son of Noah, who decided to mock and condemn and laugh about and take advantage of Noah's vulnerability by virtue of drinking too much wine after he had his first harvest of his vineyard. And then we see, in addition to that, we see the city and the tower transgression of Babel. We see that want to make a name for themselves. Now we have this wormhole is spreading into culture, into a group of people. It's not just individual or a family involved. Now it's involving an entire culture. And so we see the broadening of the wormhole of transgression with the Tower of Babel. And of course, the Holy One addresses that and sends them and creates all these different nations with different languages. And so we see the cities of the plain, but they continue their transgression. They continue in the wormhole. They decide we're not going to spread out through the earth. We're not going to be dispersed. We will maintain our integrity. We will build cities of the plain. We see Nimrod and this whole Nimrodian advance of the transgression wormhole. We see Esau's clothing, Yaakov dressing up in Esau's clothing to take what he thinks is only should be his and not Esau's. We see Laban's marketplace manipulations, both in regard to his daughters and human trafficking them to Yaakov, and then in regard to unequal scales and deception in the marketplace as his transactions, particularly as we see them developing with Jacob. And so this wormhole just keeps going into different levels and areas of life. It just continues to harm us, to put us behind the 8 ball, as it were. We enter life now in this matrix created by overindulgence with the transgression wormhole. And we see Shechem and the violence and the deception there and the vengeance factor coming forth. Then we see the brother-on-brother transgression of the older brothers and Joseph, and the jealousy and the envy and the mocking and the violence against them, and the human trafficking again with their own brother this time. And then we see the oppression of strangers transgression take place as we go down to Egypt, and we find out a nation actually hates us, and the hatred of a whole people just by virtue of the way in which they, the seed from which they come, the race which they have, this oppression of strangers, transgression. This is the world we live in, but that's not the end of the story. There's a good part. There's a good answer. And so we start with Parsha Ki Tisa. And the first lines of it are Ki Tisa, when you lift up, Ki Tisa et Rosh, when you lift up the head. In other words, in English it may say something silly like when you take a census. No, it's Ki, when, Ki Tisa, when you lift up et Rosh, the head. When you lift up the head, when you cause your head to look up, when you see higher than the things of the earth, we now can get above the transgression wormhole. We can transcend, beloved, the transgression. We can teach our children and our children's children and the neighbor and the stranger to overlook, to see above, to see beyond, to lift our head and see higher than the transgression wormhole and its effects. So this Parsha Ki Tisa, the 21st Parsha of Torah, will introduce covenantal accountability disciplines. The covenant way, the way the Holy One is designed to connect the heavens and the earth, and to have the things of the heavens come to the earth by virtue of human beings walking on in the ways of the things of heaven. This covenant way, this covenant walk features divine overwatch. But we have to lift our heads to understand that we're being watched over. And divine course correction disciplines, which we are to draw down from heaven and bring into real life effect on earth. Covenant accountability disciplines. Now, part of us would like to say, why on earth did the Holy One choose to include the sordid tale of idolatry dalliance that the world calls the golden calf sin? Why did the Holy One choose to include that sordid tale in our training camp narrative? In the discussion of how we became a nation, how we become a great nation. Did he have to put that in the book? Couldn't it have just become just a little secret between us and him, a matter of the past, an embarrassing affair of the ancient past by some other people, some other time? Why did he have to write it in the book to be read every year and make it public for the entire world to see? Couldn't it have just been our little secret? Our little dark secret? Why does the world, for that matter, why do our children and our children's children in every generation need to know what happened when we dallied with the idol? When we approached and jumped into and began to swim around in the transgression wormhole of all places, at Mount Sinai, our camp of training. Why does the world need to know? Why do our children's children need to know about this? Why can't we consider it just lesson learned, once and done? My beloved, my friends, my neighbors. The reason we had to put it in the narrative, the reason it has to be read every year, the reason we have to know and teach our children about this incident, about this idolatry dalliance, this playing around at the entrance to the wormhole of transgression, is because it isn't over yet. It's still deeply involved. It's ingrained in every facet of our life on this earth in our mortal bodies. We will always be tempted, drawn into the transgression wormhole. Our job is to learn from the Holy One, absorb his energy, his wisdom, and his light, and learn the disciplines of how to resist the draw of the magnetism of the transgression wormhole. Now, most of the transgressions that we have, as a nation, B'nai Israel, as a part of our story already, have had, we've had little transgression problems. We've had fear, irrational fear, anger at God, anger at each other. We've had complaint coming out of our mouths. We murmured, we complained. We've had covetousness. We wanted things the Egyptians supposedly had. Free fish coming at every time, all the time, and leeks and onions and all that sort of. We've had all these different things, but they all these elements of our dalliance with the transgression matrix or wormhole have all been based in the flesh, earthly, physical desires that they'll die with us. But then there's something else. This calf transgression, this golden calf, this idolatry dalliance. This is not based in the flesh. This is more dangerous and more troublesome. This particular kind of a dalliance with the transgression wormhole is based primarily in the mind, in the pseudo-intellect, the matrix between the flesh and the eternal spirit, the neshama within us. And if our transgression wormhole has corrupted us in our flesh, what happens if it gets into our mind? What happens if it gets into our pseudo-intellect and begins to change and corrupt the way we think? Futile thinking, vain imaginations. What happens if we become super narcissistic? We become selfish in everything we do. What happens if the transgressions that we engage in or indulge begin to impact our and other people's pseudo-intellectual thinking process, mind, will, and emotions? You see, dallying with an idol, anything of any importance more so than the Creator himself and his will, dallying with the superiority in our mind, or the more important, the higher importance of anything in this world over the Holy One, that is an occult practice. And like witchcraft, like necromancy, the talking to the dead, the theory of that we are doing so, like consulting witches and casting spells, all this is dealing with the transgression of thought and desire and rebellion and an intention, a desire to control, not to let the Holy One be in control, not let the Holy One guide and direct, but let us do it in our own minds. This is the sin. This is the transgression of the mind. Well, that's what we're about to deal with in Parsha Tisa when we read about the golden calf. This is a rebellion against God himself. Not just against his will, not just against his words, not just against his directions, against him as a persona. This starts with the very initial area that was addressed by the Holy One in the 10 words. That, as I said, they're like 10 touch areas of the human experience that are potentially corrupted. And he has a plan for each one that begins with one step in each one. What was the first of those 10 areas? I am the Holy One, your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I brought you out of the house of bondage. You shall have no other gods before me. You will make no graven image. Oh, you see how this is implicating. But if we want to do it our way, if we think we want another God besides him, another important factor guiding us, directing us, or motivating us besides him, then we have breached. We have jumped into the transgression wormhole. Now, this is Israel's story we're reading in the Torah. But realize this. Israel's story is illustrative. It is not unique. Every culture, every collective, every ethnicity, every ethnic group, every religion, every religious group, every nation, and every subpart of each nation and movement has at least one golden calf-like story in its history. Now, the Bible makes a point to provide a full transparency revelation. There is no covering things up. This is the way it is. This is real. I want you to know the Holy One sees things through the eyes of reality of the human experience. So the Bible makes a point to provide full transparency concerning Bnei Israel's experience with the transgression wormhole. And particularly of this golden calf episode of rebellion against who the Holy One really is, his persona, his identity against his person. Well, the Holy One wants us to see it and understand what caused it and the catastrophic fallout that flowed from it. See, there's no point trying to sugarcoat things. We find out soon enough if everything's wonderful and perfect or if there's real problems we need to deal with and we're called to deal with. So if Bnei Israel has never been a nation who had any right to claim moral superiority or perfection. We are human beings at the core, but we are something more if we are allowed to transcend what's at the core. We aspire to walk worthy of a great calling, a divine calling, an otherworld calling. But alas, we remain humans and we have to deal with the transgression wormhole from time to time. Now, before anyone else, any other nation, any other culture, any ethnicity presumes to climb upon a high horse and judge Bnei Israel, please take a second, take a deep breath. For your own sake, remember the illustrious rabbi's words. The rabbi from Nazareth, who gave a famous discussion of splinters in the eye versus beams in the eye, and about the measure with which one judges being measured back to that person. So before you step up on that high horse, before you condemn, before you accuse, before you blame Bnei Israel and single them out for their engagement with the calf and the transgression wormhole related to it, don't forget what the rabbi said. Israel gives us the Torah and didn't cover it up, didn't hide it, and didn't change it. It tells the story of the golden calf because the Holy One told us to. That's part of our story. That's part of the testimony. That's part of the good news because it was not the end of us. It was only a new beginning. We make no excuses. We harbor no illusions of infallibility. When it happened, we fell on our faces. We fell down. We made a mistake. We lost a horrible 3,000 kinsmen. And not only did we lose them, we took their lives ourselves. It's pathetic. It's sad. We learned a very hard lesson of spiritual science from messing with the transgression wormhole related to idolatry and pseudo-intellectual ideas and ideations. But then the story is that we were forgiven much. So much. Much more than we could ever have made up, much more than we could ever have earned, much more than we possibly could have deserved. We were forgiven much, and in the aftermath and the outflow from that, we learned how to love much. We were forgiven so much. We have been forgiven so much. We are still being forgiven so much. And in the aftermath and the outflow of that, we're learning, we're driven to love much. And with all due respect, isn't that the purpose of the exercise? Isn't that what your faith is supposed to be all about? To learn to love much, to learn to love the way the Creator loves, despite things that are playing around and deeply affected by the wormhole of transgression. So Torah's focus, when it gives us the calf sin narrative, is not on the ugliness of the sin, which would just lead to fleshly revulsion of those who just can't stand to think about the realities of life. Nor is the focus of the calf sin narrative of Torah on the evil doing of the sinners, how bad the Bnei Israel people were, how foolish they were, how they just didn't listen, and how they're, if we think this is about them and not about us, and not about you, not about our generations to come, not about man's condition, then we miss the whole point of the story. The focus of the story is upon the underlying cause of the covenant breach and all covenant breaches. But what is the underlying cause? Why do men walk away from the covenant and walk away from its direction and from its light and from its energy and from its mission purpose? Why do people do that? The golden calf sin narrative helps us to understand a bit of that. The second thing, the focus of the calf sin narrative of Torah involves is the societal and environmental ramifications of covenant breaching. If you walk away from the covenant, that's not just your business. It affects people around you. It affects your family first. It affects your brothers and your sisters and your neighbors. It affects your city, your town. It affects the land on which you live and through which you pass. It carries a stink, a stain, a poison into the atmosphere of the environment. It changes generationally. It changes the world, takes away, puts it under a curse. Yes, it's more than just my free choice of wanting to do something the Holy One said not to do, or reject doing something the Holy One said to do. This is a societal nuisance and a pollution of the earth. The third thing that the calf sin narrative has expressed in Torah tells us is that there is good news. There are protocols of awakening, of shifting direction, of changing, of making teshuvah, of coming back to the Holy One, about fixing it and accepting and walking in forgiveness from the Holy One, and the power of that forgiveness being an impetus for a greater life. And as we do so, we walk in a kafar coating, a coating that not just covers us and covers what we did, but begins to heal us within by virtue of having been covered and protected from the law of sin and of sowing and reaping. The law of sin and death, as Paul would call it. That's not the Torah. That's the law of what's happening in the earth, the earthly factor of once you do something, you set these horrible things in motion. But the Holy One gives us a kafar opportunity. If we will just make teshuvah and come to Him, come into His light, He will cover us. He will cover us not just so we're covered, so that we're be healed. So that we can begin to heal and return to our assigned post, report for our assigned duty, and get re-engaged with the divine plan. The Parsha Ki Tisa, therefore, has three subunits. The Parsha from Exodus 30:11 through 34:35. The first is the prelude to the calf narrative. The calf narrative is at the center, and it is the focal point or the fulcrum of this whole Parsha. But before that, we have a prelude to the calf narrative. Moshe is on the mountaintop. It's his first 40-day and 40-night journey up there. He's being given the Mishkan discourse, and he's the last chapter and a half of this Mishkan discourse is found in our parsha as the prelude to the calf narrative. The Holy One's going to start talking to us about something in this, as He has Moshe up on the mountaintop. He's going to start talking to us about kafaring. In English, I think it reads making atonement. We have a coin that makes atonement. We have oil that makes atonement. We have all these different things the Holy One's going to start talking to Moshe about atonement. Why do we need kafaring? Why do we need this covering? And what does this covering mean? think of the first time we saw something like this word, the Hebrew word, kafar. It was in the flood narrative. And in the flood narrative, what happened was that when Noah took the instructions of the Holy One, and he made the ark exactly as he was told to make it, with the dimensions and the type of wood and all that he was supposed to do, there was still a problem. The flood waters would still come in between the cracks, between the gaps, between the wood, and would seep him through this process. So the Holy One gave him he said, put on it a kafar. Put a covering on the inside and the out. Call it, in English we call it pitch. But the whole idea is inside and out. What is the pitch doing? It's making the covering that allows the sealing, the perfect sealing, S-E-A-L-I-N-G, sealing of the ark. And so whatever's underneath the pitch is protected. Whatever's underneath the covering, what is underneath the kafar, or the kippur, as it's often called in different contexts of Scripture. This is the first thing he's telling Moshe. Everything he tells Moshe is about the kafar, about how to be under the covering, under the healing covering, like a bandage that you put on. And not only does it cover your wound to keep outside forces from getting in, it begins to have an anesthetic, an analgesic effect on you, and begins to heal from the inside out. That's the idea of a covering, of a kafar, of a kippur. The second thing he does, the Holy One does, is give the divine words in divine script. He cuts out 2 tablets of stone, and with his own finger, the Holy One writes for us at least the 10 words that he spoke to all of us in our hearing in Mount Sinai. Quite exactly what he wrote and how detailed it was is subject to some sages' disagreements or whatever. We'll find out when it's time. But we know at least the 10 words were inscribed by the finger of the Holy One himself. And this was given to mankind through Moshe and Israel as a great gift, the greatest gift ever, the Holy One's own handwriting, his own instructions, his own words, in his own handwriting. What beautiful things that is. It was given to Moshe to carry down to the camp. But back at the camp, light was waning. There were people who were now hovering around the transgression wormhole. Love was growing cold. Kedusha energy was flickering and about to go out. And so the calf narrative began. It began with Exodus 32, then into 33. Moshe finds out about what took place because the Holy One says, you need to go down because your brethren, the camp, the people you brought out of Egypt have done these things. He sends him back down. As Moshe goes down, he is in a fit of rage. He had a conversation with the Holy One before he left the throne room on top of Mount Sinai, the superimposed throne room. But he had this conversation. The Holy One was satisfied after what Moshe had said. He was not angry anymore, but Moshe was angry. And the further he went down, and the more he heard of the things that were going on down below, and the singing and the dancing and the shouting and the partying and the rebel rousing and the debauchery that was going on down in the world, he was trying to make re-entry into that world, but that is hard to do when you've been in the presence of the glory and the majesty of the Creator of the universe for 40 days and 40 nights. So he didn't stick the landing. He came down and he took that precious gift that the Holy One had given for mankind, these 2 tablets inscribed in his own handwriting, the Holy One's own handwriting, the gift of love and the gift of hope for mankind and purpose for mankind, and he throws them down. Nowhere does it say the Holy One told him to do that. That was what he did in a fit of rage, human rage, fleshly rage. And then he began to try to take everybody under account. He did some things. We won't have time to talk about all of them. You can read them for yourselves in Parsha Tisa. He asked for an excuse or an explanation from Aaron, and Aaron says, well, we got to put the gold in the fire, and a calf came out. And then we see that Moshe, without a word saying, and the Holy One spoke to Moshe and said, Moshe declares, all who's on the side of the Holy One, come to me, go through the camp, put your sword on your side, pull out your sword, and go through and slaughter every man his neighbor and his kinsman, not having anything to do with who was doing what or who was guilty of this calf sin. just to slaughter. So they began to slaughter, and fortunately, mercifully, it stopped after 3,000 die. 3,000 is a lot, but we have 600,000 men plus women and children there. So it's less than 1/2 of 1% of the population. It's a horrible thing, and there were bloody masses, slaughtered masses of flesh piled and bloody and bleeding all over the floor of the desert. But yet we survived. And then we have a season of everyone went to their own tent, and Moshe went to his tent, and we waited to find out what would happen to us. We knew what we deserved. We knew what we had done. We knew our dalliance with the transgression wormhole had done horrible damage and would do horrible damage if something didn't happen. So we waited, and then we have Moshe's encounter in the cleft of the rock. The Holy One reveals his mercy. As a matter of fact, when he designates and he specifies what his name is, what his persona or his personality really is, which had been forgotten during the times of the golden calf, when we had done the idolatry dalliance. We forgot who he was. And he lets us know, you didn't even understand, merciful, merciful. Rahum Hanun, I am the merciful, graceful one, the kind one, the covenant faithful one, the compassionate one. And we begin to see this revelation of who the Holy One is, and it changes Moshe, and it changes, through Moshe, it changes everyone in the camp, and through everyone in the camp, and the whole story of Bnei Israel, it can change the world. It changed the world, because once we realize we have been forgiven much, that opens us up. It takes away the obstacles. It inspires us. It encourages. It empathizes us to love much. And that's what the world needs now and always, and will always need in every generation. So with the cleft of the rock encounter leads to a renewal of the covenant. The covenant's not over. That's the good news. The covenant is just beginning. And the new covenant is the same as the old covenant. The Holy One will take us back to the land. He will give us these instructions. He tells us in chapter 34 the details of how he will take us to the Holy Land and what our job is when we get there. And realize that we're not going to have some sort of idealistic world there. It's not going to be a utopia. We're going to have to clean it the way he's been cleaning us at Sinai. We will, though, walk in the light. And that will be the end of the story of Parsha Ki Tisa, is that Moshe will be glowing with the light of the countenance of the Holy One. And we will be walking in the light. So let us sing our call to worship before we have to go. Our Baraku, the blessing before reading from the Torah. If you know the Hebrew, sing along with me. Baraku et Adonai Hamvorak. Baruch Adonai Hamvorak Leolam Vayed. Baruch Ata Adonai Eloheinu Melech HaOlam Asher Bachar Banu Mikol Ha'amin V'natan Lanu Et Torato. Baruch Ata Adonai Noten HaTorah. And now would you open our eyes, O Holy One, that we may see wondrous things in your Torah. For we are just strangers in this earth, so do not hide your instructions for living from us. And now it's story time again. Previously in the Torah, before Parsha Ki Tisa, the stunning reason the Creator of the universe delivered Abraham's seed as he promised he would, along with a mixed multitude from all nations of the earth, from all ethnicities and all tongues and tribes of the earth, from all the scattered nations that have been set apart since the time of the Tower of Babel. The stunning reason the Creator of the universe delivered the seed of Abraham with all these people was being revealed. See, he has a plan. We've been learning about it in the Torah, a plan to restore fellowship between man and God and his Creator. Fellowship allowing us to abide with him and him to abide with us, to commune like it was in the Garden of Eden, to commune intimately with the Holy One and have him commune intimately with us. And to co-labor with us as he did with Adam before the fall. To co-labor with all of humankind, all who are willing to come to the sound of his voice as he leads them and leads their generations in a grand redemptive and restorative campaign. And we have learned also in Torah, the stories that we've been reading tell us that the Holy One is called Am Yisrael, the people of Israel, Bnei Israel, the sons and daughters, the children of Israel, as they're called in the King James Version of the Bible. Called this group to serve as the Creator's model nation, a snow globe people on earth, pointing and leading the way for the other nations to follow, so that they can all know the Holy One, all embrace his wonder, his will, his ways, his wisdom, and his wholeness through holiness plan. And we've also learned that the part of this mission of Bnei Israel, the sons and daughters of Israel, is for them to become and prepare a beachhead to bring the kingdom of heaven on earth as it is in heaven. A beachhead for the Holy One to build his kingdom in the world. A spiritually elevated earth space is where it begins, the Mishkan, the tabernacle. This is the place from which he will abide with and in the midst of mankind. This is the place in which he will display for all to see his beauty, his majesty, his goodness, his goodwill, his good vision for the world to see, with his forgiveness and with his healing and with his kafaring protocols. This is the place, the tabernacle that he's been talking about with Moshe on the mountain before this whole parsha begins, is that he wants a place where people can immerse in life, in light, in love, in hope, in majesty and beauty, where they can find kippur, covering that heals, and they can become kadash, they can become infused with, absorb, and begin to emit the holiness energy of heaven. He also wants a place where he can reveal his plan of redemption to all men in a sequence, dramatically, through the action sequences of an epic passion play most people call the feast, each one designed to represent one element of the passion play, of the redemptive plan of the Holy One. Now, this week in Parsha Tisa, we've already talked a little bit about the transgression wormhole, but there's more to it. We're supposed to, in this Parsha, learn the necessary disciplines and protocols of decompression. We're supposed to be able to travel into the realms of the heavenlies, the beauty realm, whether we do it by meditation or reading or prayer, whatever methodology we use, or whether we can physically, if there were one, go straight into a temple or a tabernacle and do these things and have these adventures in holiness. But we're supposed to learn the necessary disciplines and protocols of decompression, coming back then after we've been in those holy places, holy ways, holy moments, holy meditations, and come back into the world and become a testimony, a witness, a story, a guide for other people in our family and in our household, in our neighborhood, and in our city, and in our world. So learn how to stay focused during seasons of prophetic disconnect. We can't always have a Moshe talking to us, and that's one of the problems. Whenever people lose their connection with their mentor or their guide or their teacher or their rabbi or their preacher, as the case may be, whatever you want to call these people that sort of serve indirectly as guides or helpers, when we lose connection with them, we can lose connection with the Creator himself if we're not careful. But we need to learn there are disciplines so that we can stay focused, even in seasons when we're all by ourselves. Second thing, we learn that there is a smooth, safe, responsible way to transition from the beauty realm back to the mundane dimensions of life in the flesh and nearness to the transgression wormhole. Now that's the way we've been learning, but every picture, as we've been studying the Mishkan Discourse, every picture tells a story. So the stories of the Holy One are not just the words on the pages of Torah, they're the pictures he draws for us. This week, before we leave Sinai, before we leave the top of the mountain and Moshe's revelation in the Mishkan Discourse, the tabernacle, it's down low. Before we leave that, we're going to see a few things. We're going to see basically 6 things We're going to see the coin, a coin that's a half shekel in quantity or weight, according to this holiness sanctuary shekel. We're going to find it's a way of connecting the heavenly realm and the earthly realm. It's not the things of the heavens, but it corresponds in frequency and tone and beauty and purity to the things of the heavens. So we're able to use that, and ever managed to bring one as a kafar. We're learning this kafar protocol, this kafaring discipline. Put yourself under a cover. Not a person covering, not a man covering, not an organizational covering. Put yourself under a teruma covering, like what you have brought to the Holy One, and He has touched and made whole. So we've learned that will be there. Then we'll see a bronze laver, a place of washing hands and washing feet. Priests will engage. We'll see the pictures begin to tell the story that we all have to have a cleansing river of living water to flow over us. And where we touch the world the most is our hands and our feet, and we need to be able to cleanse that and purify that, and not let the gunk, the dirt, build up upon those places, and not try to transition without the washing that takes place. And so we'll learn about the oil of anointing, and why it's to cover us and cover everything, and it's supposed to make the connection, to grease the connection for the docking of the heavens and the earth at the Mishkan. We learn about the incense, the beautiful, sweet, fragrant incense. These pictures are being drawn for us. Then we'll learn about the craftsman and the creativity download that the Creator of the universe is going to birth in His people through particularly two individuals, Bezalel of the tribe of Yehuda and Oholiab of the tribe of Dan. And these people will be examples of how He is introducing His own creativity into man as they connect with Him there in the things of the Mishkan. So we learn these pictures telling a story, and then we get into the golden calf episode itself. Well, that's kind of where we're going to get to here. I want you to understand these things, though. There is good news. You in your life, I in mine, your children in theirs, your friends and neighbors in theirs, in all of our realms, right there close to us is a wormhole of transgression. That wormhole has a gravitational pull that is trying to drag our flesh first, and then our pseudo-intellect, where we have an interface between the spirit and the flesh. We're trying to draw both of those into its pull, into its grasp, and cause havoc in the earth and bring it back to tohu, vavohu, without form and voidness and darkness. Dark energy forces. Understand, we have that deal. Every day you get up, every moment you live, every situation you encounter, every interaction with other human beings, whether in the home or on the street or in the parking lot or on the marketplace or wherever you may go, in the educational institution or in the workplace that you may go, you're going to have very close to you a transgression wormhole that you could slip into, and that's trying to draw you out. That's why you have to have discipline, have to have understanding of who the Holy One is, and yirat Adonai, fear of the Holy One, reverence for Him, and love of Him. And these things will keep you from and help you resist the pull of the wormhole. So, as you think about that, understand that one of the things that the Holy One's going to tell you is important. One of the primary means of discipline is the Sabbath, the seventh day Sabbath. It's not some law to perform or to accomplish or to achieve. It's not that. The Sabbath is a weapon, is a tool in your arsenal. It's for man. It's given to you, given to mankind to help us reconnect with the Creator, to help us to pull back and have a pull that overrides the pull of the transgression wormhole and pulls us back into the Kedusha wormhole that takes us back to where He is. The Sabbath is filled with His holiness. He made it holy, and He blessed it. It's filled with His blessing. And what is the transgression wormhole full of? The curse and the uncleanness and the profanity of this mortal world in its most vile form. So the Sabbath is a very important part of it. Read what he says about it. The Sabbath is a sign to you. It is the mark that tells the world who you are. And this is a critical fulcrum point of the disciplines of the Torah, of the Holy One, of overcoming the transgression wormhole. And its gravitational pull is the Sabbath. And the last thing he tells us is the gift of the written word. The gift of the tablets in particular, the 2 tablets inscribed by his fingers. This has become the centerpiece of heaven's invasion, of heaven's beachhead. At the center of heaven's beachhead, at the epicenter of it, the force, the power grid of it is found in the written words of the Holy One, his instructions, particularly of the 10 words, but expanding out from the 10 words for all the things that say, and the Holy One spoke to Moshe and said, this is our discipline. Focus upon these things, staying in the Sabbath, going through the protocols that are mentioned in the calf sin narratives. This is where we see. And at the end, you see that when Moshe comes back down the mountain the second time, this time his face is shining. This time he's felt the mercy and the grace and the compassion of the Holy One. This time he knows the Holy One is not an evil, angry, vindictive God. He is zealous. He is jealous. He is passionate, but he is not vindictive. Thank the Holy One. Bless his name. It's time for me to leave you now. So Shabbat Shalom. Have a good Sabbath, and I'll see you next week.